It happened on a Thursday. I think it was a Thursday or maybe a Wednesday. When something like that happens, the days of the week lose their meaning. Time, in general, flows differently. It blurs like an old photograph in the rain. I'm still trying to piece together those fragments, to reconstruct the chain of events, to understand where exactly I went wrong. Where did I miss that one moment that turned my whole life upside down? I remember the morning was unusually chaotic. The twins, Adam and Eve, didn't give me a moment's peace. One wanted porridge, the other asked for juice. They had just started walking then, but still preferred to crawl. The whole house looked like a battlefield after an invasion of tiny hurricanes. And, of course, my head was filled with thoughts of work, unpaid bills, and how to do everything at once. I constantly felt this pressure, this lack of time, which haunted me day after day. Maybe this eternal rush was the cause of everything? We were getting ready to go to the park. A normal walk, like hundreds of others. I always loved those moments when I could breathe a little while the children played on the playground. The sun was shining brightly, birds were singing, and the air was filled with the scent of freshly cut grass. I put Adam's favorite blue cap with dinosaurs on him, and Eve's pink jumpsuit with bunnies. They looked so cute, so carefree. Who would have thought that this idyllic scene would turn into a nightmare? We left the house. A double stroller is a story in itself. It's huge, unwieldy, but impossible without it. Adam usually sat on the right, Eve on the left. I always checked the straps, always without exception. It was my unspoken rule, my safety mantra. But that day something went wrong. I swear, I was sure I checked. Or do I just want to think that? The walk to the park took about 10 minutes, no more. We lived on a quiet street, cars rarely passed by. I pushed the stroller and talked to the children. They babbled something, pointing their little fingers at flying birds, at flowers in the front yards. I smiled, answered them, trying to be attentive. But my thoughts, as often happens, were wandering somewhere far away. I was recalling a conversation with my boss, planning a shopping list, humming some silly tune that had stuck with me since morning. Do you remember that feeling when you do something automatically? That's exactly how I pushed that stroller. My hands moved, my legs walked, but my brain was occupied with something entirely different. I felt the weight of the stroller, its gentle swaying. I heard the children's laughter, their contented cooing. But was it all real? Or was my brain just painting a familiar picture, disconnecting me from reality? This is what torments me the most. This question, it keeps me awake at night. Was I truly there? Completely? Or only halfway lost in my thoughts? And if so, if I was that inattentive, then what happened next? It's my fault, isn't it? I'm still searching for answers. And it seems the more I search, the deeper I sink into this whirlpool of despair. But I have to tell you, I have to share this burden, because maybe some of you will understand. Or, at least, not repeat my mistake. We reached the park. As usual, I chose our favorite bench under the old, sprawling oak tree. From there, I had a good view of the playground, and I could relax a little while the children played. I remember how light I felt when we finally arrived. I imagined taking out the book I couldn't finish, or just sitting in silence, enjoying the moment. This thought of a short break, of a few minutes of peace, was so desirable. And it seems this very longing for peace played a cruel trick on me. I parked the stroller next to the bench. As always, I turned it so the children could see the playground. And I could see them. I don't remember unfastening the straps. And this is the most terrifying thing. I don't remember. I usually always unfasten them at the playground when they were ready to run. But that day, I just got distracted. Maybe my phone vibrated, or did someone call out to me? I can't remember. My brain, it's as if it cut out that moment, leaving only emptiness. I sat on the bench, took out my phone, checked messages. I think a friend texted me, asking about something unimportant. I replied to her, then scrolled through the news feed. Just a few minutes. I swear. No more than 5, maybe 7. During this time, Adam and Eve usually sat quietly in the stroller, looking around. They were so curious, so well-behaved at that age. I was used to having those few minutes of relative calm before they asked to get out. Then I looked up, and then I saw Eve was sitting in the stroller. She was smiling, waving at me, and next to her, emptiness. The right side was empty, where Adam always sat. My heart stopped. The air seemed to be sucked out of my lungs. I felt a cold rush through my body, and then heat. My head spun. No, this can't be, I whispered. My hands trembled. I jumped up from the bench, ran to the stroller. Empty. Absolutely empty. I started to panic. My brain refused to process what was happening. I frantically looked around. The playground was almost empty. A couple of mothers with toddlers, a few teenagers on skateboards. No one who could have taken my child. No one who could have led him away. Or did I just not see? My gaze darted around, but couldn't focus on anything. Everything was blurred. I called Adam. Once, twice, 3 times. My voice trembled, turning into a whisper, then a scream. Eve cried. Her crying was the only sound that pierced through that fog of terror. I ran to the playground. I went around all the slides, all the swings, looked behind the bushes, under the benches. My heart was pounding like crazy. It felt like it was about to burst out of my chest. I repeated his name, but there was only silence in response. This silence, it was deafening. It permeated every cell of my body, freezing me from the inside. My legs buckled, but I kept running. Where? I didn't know. Just run, search, find. Find him, my little Adam. He couldn't just disappear. He couldn't. I started asking people. I ran up to every mother, every passerby, gasping for breath, trying to explain what happened. My words got tangled. Tears streamed down my cheeks. People looked at me with pity, with bewilderment. Some tried to help, looked around. But no one saw anything. No one saw my son. No one saw him get out of the stroller. No one saw where he went. This helplessness, this absolute helplessness, it tore me apart. And then I understood. I understood that it all happened because of my inattention, because of my mistake, because of those few minutes. And I knew that my life would never be the same again. Time then stopped. It froze, turning into a viscous, sticky substance that choked me. I kept running around the park, already without any hope, just by inertia. My legs moved, but my brain had already shut down. I felt like I was caught in some terrible dream from which I couldn't escape. Eve cried in my arms, clinging to me. Her tiny, defenseless bundle of warmth was the only thing that kept me from a complete collapse. I looked at her tear-stained face, and understood I had to be strong for her. But how? How could I be strong when I felt my world crumbling? I dialed the police number. My fingers trembled so much I could barely hit the buttons. The voice on the phone sounded so calm, so detached. He asked standard questions. What does the child look like? What was he wearing? When did you notice he was missing? Each question was like a stab with a knife. Each question made me relive that horror again and again. I tried to remember every detail, every little thing that could help. His favorite blue cap with dinosaurs. Why didn't I notice he wasn't wearing it? Why didn't I notice he wasn't in the stroller? These questions drilled into my brain, giving me no peace. The police arrived quickly. They started searching the park, interviewing people. Volunteers arrived. joining the search. The park filled with people in bright vests, combing every bush, every corner. I stood aside, hugging Eve, watching this scene as if it wasn't happening to me, but to someone else. Everything seemed so unreal, so surreal. I saw sympathy in the eyes of the police, in the eyes of the volunteers, but it didn't ease my pain. It only intensified my guilt. My husband, Daniel, arrived half an hour later. I called him right after the police. His face was pale, his eyes full of horror. He hugged me, and I felt his body tremble. We stood there, embracing, and were silent. What could be said at such a moment? Words were powerless. We both understood what had happened. We both understood that our lives had split into before and after. And this, after, seemed like impenetrable darkness. The search continued late into the night. 9 units were involved, drones with thermal imagers. Every house in the area was checked, every basement, every attic. But Adam was not there. Not a single trace. Not a single clue. He just disappeared, dissolved into thin air, like smoke. And with every hour, with every minute, my hope melted like a candle in the wind. I felt something dying inside me. Something important, something alive. Returning home, I could barely stand. The house seemed empty, cold. The children's room, which used to be filled with laughter and commotion, was now filled with ringing silence. Adam's crib, his toys, his clothes, all reminded me of him, of his presence. And every such detail pierced me through. I held his favorite plush monkey, which he always took to bed with him, and cried like never before in my life. It was a cry of despair, a cry of pain, a cry of hopelessness. From that day on, my life turned into an endless torture. Every morning I woke up with one thought: today I will find him. Every night I fell asleep with one hope: tomorrow he will return. But days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and Adam was still gone. And this uncertainty, it was the worst of all, worse than knowing the absolute worst. Because as long as there is uncertainty, there is hope. And hope, it both saves and kills. It doesn't let you give up, but it also doesn't give you peace. It keeps you in this suspended state, waiting for a miracle that may never happen. And I knew that I had to live with this eternal hope, with this eternal pain, and with this eternal question. Why? Why me? Why my son? And most importantly, why didn't I notice? The days merged into one endless gray stream. Every phone call made me jump. Every knock on the door made me freeze with anticipation. What if it's him? What if it's a call from the police announcing that Adam has been found? What if the person who saw him is standing at the door? But they always turned out to be false hopes. Marketers, neighbors, delivery people, everyone but the one I was waiting for. My heart tightened with disappointment each time, and then swelled again with a new dose of hope. It was exhausting, like a roller coaster, only you fall down for much longer than you go up. Daniel tried to support me. He was my rock, my anchor in that raging sea. He found words of comfort, hugged me when I cried. But I saw him suffering too. I saw that deep pain in his eyes, that unspoken yearning. He stopped smiling, stopped laughing. Our home, which used to be full of joyful children's laughter, had turned into a crypt. We spoke in whispers, as if afraid to disturb the fragile balance that barely held us back from complete despair. Eve, our little Eve, she felt everything. She became quieter, more withdrawn. Her games became less noisy, and her smile less frequent. She missed her brother, that was obvious. And that broke my heart doubly. I deprived her of a brother, and myself of a piece of my soul. I started to immerse myself in routine, trying to find some salvation in it. Cleaning, cooking, taking care of Eve. All this became a way for me not to go crazy, not to lose touch with reality. But even in the most mundane tasks, his absence was keenly felt. When I folded laundry, I automatically looked for his tiny socks. When I made breakfast, I cooked for one less. Every such moment was like a sting, reminding me that he wasn't there, that I was guilty. The feeling of guilt, it became my constant companion. It haunted me day and night. I replayed that fateful day over and over in my head, trying to find even one moment, even one detail that could have changed everything. If only I had checked the straps, if only I hadn't been distracted by the phone, if only I had just looked up a few seconds earlier. These if onlys became real torture. They burned me from the inside, giving me no peace. I knew it was my fault. I felt it with every cell of my body. And I understood that I would never forgive myself. I looked for any way to help in the search. I put up posters, talked to detectives, participated in support groups for parents whose children had gone missing. I heard so many stories, so many tragedies. But each of them, with all its pain, only intensified my own despair. Because each story had its own unique pain, but also its own unique outcome. And my outcome was unknown. And that was the most terrifying thing. But there were moments when I felt I had to do something. Not just wait, not just hope, but actively search. I started researching everything related to missing children. Statistics, search methods, the psychology of abductors. I read books, articles, watched documentaries. I wanted to know everything to be ready for any turn of events. It seemed to me that if I was informed enough, I could find him. This was my last thread I clung to, my last desperate wish to turn back time. I remember one night I was sitting in his room. Darkness, silence. Only moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating the toys on the shelf. I picked up his favorite storybook, the one he asked me to read every evening, The Gingerbread Man. I started reading it aloud, in a whisper, to myself. And I felt like I could hear his laughter, his questions. I felt like he was near. It was such a vivid moment, so real. And then I opened my eyes, and everything disappeared. Only emptiness and pain remained. And I realized that this pain would always be with me. But something changed in that moment. Something clicked inside me. I felt that I had to be not just a victim of circumstances, but someone who fights for him, for our future, for our family. And with that thought, I began a new stage of my life. A stage that perhaps would lead me to unexpected discoveries. Several years passed. The pain didn't disappear. It just transformed. From a sharp, unbearable knife, it turned into a dull, aching pain that was constantly present somewhere deep inside. Like a chronic illness that reminds you of itself at the most unexpected moments. And that's when in those moments I felt like the whole world around me lost its colors and the sounds faded. It's like you're watching a movie and then someone turns off the sound and you only see moving pictures without understanding what's happening. Eve grew up. She became a strong, intelligent girl. But the shadow of loss still hung over her. She never knew her brother, never remembered him. But she saw my pain, her father's pain, and that, without a doubt, left its mark on her young soul. I tried to give her everything I could, surround her with love, care. But I knew it wasn't enough. Nothing could fill the void Adam left. We continued searching, not as actively as in the first years, but we still continued. Every time new information about missing children appeared, I carefully studied it. Every news report, every flyer I saw on the street brought a new wave of hope and anxiety. I knew that the chances decreased with each passing year, but I refused to believe it. As a mother, I couldn't give up hope. It would be a betrayal of my son. I started working with charitable organizations that search for missing children. It gave me some meaning, some feeling that I was doing something important. I helped other parents, sharing my experience, my pain. I saw their tears, their despair, and understood that I wasn't alone. It was a comfort, though bitter. We were all part of one large, invisible community, united by a common tragedy. One day, during one of these meetings, I heard a story that shook me to the core. The story of a child who disappeared in a large shopping mall. His mother was distracted for just 1 minute, and when she looked up, the child was gone. The search lasted for several years, and no one believed he would be found. But then, after almost 10 years, he was found, alive and well. He grew up in another family who adopted him, unaware of his past. This story gave me new hope. Fragile, almost unreal, but still hope. That perhaps Adam is also alive. That perhaps he is growing up somewhere, unaware of us, his real family. I became obsessed with this thought. I started researching databases of adoptions, missing children, unidentified persons. I spent nights in front of the computer, scrolling through thousands of photos, thousands of names. My eyes ached from the strain. My head throbbed. But I couldn't stop. I felt it was my path, my only path to find him. And then one day, late at night, when the whole house was asleep, and I was sitting alone in the silence, I stumbled upon a photograph. It was blurry, old. It showed a boy about 10 years old, with dark hair and very familiar eyes. My heart stopped. It was such a strong feeling, so unexplainable. I felt it was him. I couldn't explain why, but I knew. It was my Adam, the boy I lost years ago, sitting in that photo, smiling. But even more importantly, he looked not only like Adam, he also looked like Eve. The resemblance was so striking that it was simply impossible to ignore. My hands trembled. I enlarged the photo, trying to see every detail. And the longer I looked, the stronger my conviction became. It was him, my son. But how could this be? Where had he been all these years? And why did this photo only appear now? Millions of questions rushed through my head, and one of them, the most important, the most terrifying. What now? What will happen now that I've found him? Am I ready for him not to remember me? Am I ready for him to have another family? Am I ready for the truth, whatever it may be? I didn't know, but one thing I knew for sure. I had to go all the way. I had to find out. I had to understand why fate had taken such a cruel turn. And I felt that something much bigger than I could imagine was about to be revealed. The next few days were enveloped in a feverish, unreal anticipation. I couldn't sleep, barely ate. My brain was working overtime, replaying hundreds of scenarios. How would I tell him? What would I say to his new family? How would they react? I shared my suspicions with Daniel. He, of course, was shaken. At first, he was skeptical, fearing it was another false hope that would bring even more pain. But when I showed him the photo, when he saw the resemblance between Adam and Eve, he also felt that inexplicable pull, that inner certainty. We contacted the organization that had published the photo. They were extremely cautious, understanding the delicate nature of the situation. They explained that a boy named Noah had been found a decade ago in another city, far from ours. He was alone, without documents, without any indication of who he was or where he came from. He was placed in an orphanage and then adopted by a family who didn't know about his past. This family, it turned out, was very good, loving, and that was another reason for my worries. I didn't want to destroy their lives, their happiness, but I also couldn't give up my son. We went through a long and agonizing process, a DNA test. It was the longest period of waiting in my life. Each day felt like an eternity. I prayed, asking higher powers for it to be him. And then, finally, the call. The voice on the phone was official, but with a hint of sympathy. "The test is positive," he said. My world turned upside down in an instant. Again. But this time, completely differently. It was shock, joy, fear, and relief, all together, mixed into one inseparable ball of emotions. My son was found. He was alive. He had been alive all this time. The meeting. Oh, that meeting. It's impossible to describe in words. We arrived in another city, at the house that was now his home. I saw him. He stood at the doorway, tall, handsome, with the same eyes as in the photograph. The same eyes as Eve's. He looked at us with bewilderment, with caution. To him, we were strangers. And that was painful, very painful. He didn't remember us, didn't remember anything from his past life. It was as if he was born anew into another family. But when Eve ran to him and hugged him, when he felt her warmth, something changed in his eyes. Something flickered. Maybe it was body memory, soul memory. He hugged her back. And in that moment, I realized that we had a chance to restore what was lost, a chance to create a new story, the story of our reunited family. We started slowly, step by step. We told him about his past, showed him photos, videos. He listened, sometimes with interest, sometimes with a slight detachment. His adoptive parents were incredible people. They understood that he had the right to know the truth, and they supported us. We all worked together to build a bridge between his two lives, between his past and present. Sometimes when I look at him, I still feel a pang of guilt, a pang for those few minutes of inattention that cost us so many years of separation. But then I see his smile, hear his laughter, and realize that the most important thing is that he is here, that he is with us, and that our story is not only a story of pain and loss, but also a story of hope, love, and forgiveness. Forgiveness that I, perhaps, will someday be able to give myself. Because now I know, sometimes even the most insignificant mistake can lead to a huge drama, but sometimes, just sometimes, it can also lead to an incredible miracle. And I hope that my story, told here, will help someone understand that even in the darkest night, there is always a glimmer of hope. The most important thing is not to give up and not to stop searching. And, of course, always be attentive to those you love. Because 1 second can change everything, but it can also change everything for the better.